I do radio commentary here in Wisconsin for wrestling, for basketball, for football, for softball, for baseball. We'll get into that a little bit as well. I'm actually a charity runner for JDRF for their marathon team for the London Marathon. And we'll have a link below here that I hope you like this conversation we'll have with a very special guest. So click on that, donate a couple pounds, a couple bucks as well. And if you have heard his commentary, maybe you might recognize him from season 1 of Welcome to Wrexham on FX. We're going to call this a workshop session for season 2. We're going to get you an episode, Mark, a solo episode. So we'll make sure that Mark and, Rob and Ryan see this as well. But Mark Griffiths, thank you so much for joining us. One of my favorite radio commentators out there right now.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. Thank you very much.
And let's kind of start with this right away. Did you ever think 2 years ago, so Rob and Ryan, they'd take over the football club, Wrexham AFC. 2020, we're coming up on the pandemic. It's kind of, National League and things like that. Did you think that 3 years later, there would be a person that works at a radio station in Sturgeon Bay, lives in Green Bay, that would email you and say, hey, let's talk about radio commentary. Let's talk about everything that you do and just how much Wrexham, a fifth-tier football club in Great Britain, has just absolutely exploded over the last year and a half?
Well, I've got quite an imagination, but no. I'll be honest, even when the takeover took place, I thought, well, okay, these guys know what they're doing. They're going to give us a fabulous boost. But I still thought, if we get maybe 6,000-7,000 fans a game, if we draw a few more people in, more just locally around Wrexham, it would be a massive success. Whereas, as it is, we sell every game out, and we're going to add 50% onto our stadium. It'll probably still be sold out. And honestly, the international reaction has absolutely blown my mind. It really has been fabulous in so many ways. So no, I really didn't imagine it, especially as it was during lockdown. So, I was in a football ground which was empty. In those tough times, you really didn't imagine it being a vibrant thing and a global thing like this. Not at all.
And I think they mentioned as we record this, the FA Cup game against Sheffield United drew 1 million people watching on ESPN+. For me, if it wasn't for Wrexham USA, I would have 0 Wrexham gear. Luckily, I got my hat and my Turf Hotel shirt that I wear on game days and things like that. You can't get Wrexham stuff through the store online at the very least. It's just crazy. Because, you would be the equivalent here of what I was talking to with other people. We used to have a League 2 in the USL in Green Bay, the Green Bay Voyagers. That's like if the Green Bay Voyagers beat an MLS squad. And, they were drawing like 1,000. People didn't really realize they were there. Sadly, they aren't there anymore. And here's this team, equivalent level, obviously a little bit different, but just, it's a worldwide phenomenon. And you've had to develop a whole new podcast, the hashtag Ask Wrexham podcast, to answer questions like mine about where you like calling games. In your most recent episode, you're explaining promotion and relegation and things like that, things that maybe you took kind of, for granted, thinking, oh, everybody knows this, but you have this whole new audience you have to explain the game to.
It is astonishing. And just to say about the Ask Wrexham podcast, we used Ask Wrexham, the hashtag on Twitter, to try and encourage interaction during our commentaries way before the takeover. And it didn't, it sort of took off in that there was a really sort of loyal band of 20 people, or maybe a little less, who would interact. There were genuinely some games when nobody used it for the whole match. Whereas now, like you said, I do an hour-long podcast of all the great stuff that we just don't see, because honestly, if I was trying to read them and keeping up during the game now, I wouldn't see the game. It is just wonderful. I've got to say, I'm not totally caught out in a way by explaining things that in terms of taking them for granted, I've always had a global view of football. I've always been somebody who wants to have wide horizons. And I've always been fascinated by American sport and American culture. I admit I don't actually follow American sports, but I'm aware of it. I went through a spell of watching baseball, but I can't find 3 hours a day to keep up, and I'm a bit obsessive. You know, if I'm going to follow a team, I'm going to watch every game. And in baseball, well, you couldn't do that, could you? So I was aware of differences between different countries and the way they did it. I was aware of the difference between American sport and ours, and I think that's part of the reason why I love the interaction so much, because I did my degree in modern history, main subject American foreign policy. Like I said, love American culture, and so I think I've got some of the idioms. I can see where a lot of the questions are coming from, and maybe I can use sympathetic language in explaining it, and so that makes it a really fascinating thing for me.
And I've always, and I'm sidebar on this one, you've always answered my questions. Every time you answer my text, if people aren't tweeting you, do it, because you always acknowledge them. I'm sure your wife and your cats, they probably laugh at you, because I can just see you just tweeting away, just answering all these questions, and I appreciate it so much. Was that kind of the first time when you realized, hey, we might have something big here with this takeover, when you're getting these comments during the games and you have to develop podcasts and just people are coming up to you now at the race course saying, hi, I'm from so-and-so. I mean, that's got to be a completely when was that moment for you?
I think that you're right. I think that when Ask Wrexham really exploded, that was when, in many ways, all these things coalesced for me. I've always been very aware, though, that, you know, especially before the streaming came on, we were the first line of contact, really, our audio commentary. If you were following us from afar and you wanted to find things out, we were the people you could come and ask most easily. And so if I'm honest, I was aware that we're presenting the face of Wrexham, if you will, which fitted in very comfortably with the way I wanted to do the commentary, and always have done anyway, because I feel that if you only understand sport in the sense of what's happening on the field, you're not understanding it fully. There's a great West Indian cricket writer called C.L.R. James, who was a cricket writer, historian, philosopher. Cricket being more of an upper class sport, fancies itself as being quite erudite. There's lots of very thoughtful literature about it. And C.L.R. James wrote a book called Beyond the Boundary, to sort of say that sport only makes sense in context. And his big quote was, what do they know of cricket who only cricket know? So not a reference to the Always Sunny character. That's a different matter altogether. That really is some different matter altogether. And so it fitted in beautifully to how I saw the commentary going, and that was partly informed by the fact we were run by the fans, and the fans prioritise community work. That we've suddenly got a lot of people who don't know anything about Wrexham or the club interested, and we were in a perfect situation to talk about everything around the club as well, which is exactly what I've been doing before, if you will. So it's wonderful, and I think you're right. I think it was Ask Wrexham exploding that made me really see that this was a real opportunity to carry on doing what I was doing already, but for a lot more people.
And I think it was one of the episodes of Welcome to Wrexham that made me say, I gotta find out if I could listen to this guy, because I forget what the episode it was. For some reason, I think it's the one when Wrexham came back from like 3 goals down to win the match, and they had the camera on you. You were hooting and hollering, and you know, one of the big reasons why I'm running for JDRF is a former Cubs announcer by the name of Ron Santo. He played for the Chicago Cubs during the late 50s through the 60s. I believe he retired in 1970 when he went to the other side of town to play for the White Sox. And he played with diabetes the entire time, and that was before all the glucometers, all the technology that allowed you to keep track of your blood sugar. And he told a story about how he went up to bed and he knew he was low on blood sugar. And he started to see double and he started to see triple, and he's like, you know what? I'm just going to hit the middle ball and hope I slug it out. And he's able to hit I believe he may have even hit a home run, to be honest with you, and he sprinted around because he knew he didn't have enough time. He had to go back into the dugout to get a candy bar just to get his sugar levels up. He was a very similar broadcaster to you, only he did more color work, not necessarily play-by-play, just wearing the emotions on his sleeves. And when you listen to you broadcast, and I appreciated being able to listen to the Sheffield United call, you could tell that was probably one of the happiest moments in your life. And like I said, that just drew me to your commentaries even more. And as I've tweeted with you, I'm listening to you while I go for runs. I'm kind of scheduling, different drives around your games. I mean, you do such a great job. And how is that for you to kind of make sure that you're able to do your job describing the action, but also let your colors show as well?
Well, I've always years ago. Oh, hang on, my cat is on the laptop, so I need to be careful he doesn't disconnect us there. I think he's distracted now. I've always felt that the key thing is being able to be honest about what's happening. And years ago, I remember the club website, not meaning to upset me, said my gloriously biased commentary. And I've always taken exception to that, in that, okay, I am biased in the sense that I am doing it. I want Wrexham to win, but my bias comes out in the sense that I know the audience is Wrexham fans. We're on the club's platform, so I'm playing for my audience. But I honestly, and I'm sure a lot of people will look at incidents I describe and disagree now, but I honestly look to be honest in what's happening. If we're playing badly, I will say we're playing badly. If the referee makes a mistake in our favour, I'll say that we were lucky. So I don't find that too bad. I think I'm passionate, I'm enthusiastic. I don't hide the fact I'm commentating from Wrexham's perspective, but I do want to give an honest picture of the game and give credit where it's due. And if we're bad and the other side's good, often I will say that, when people criticise us. Naturally, sports fans just look at their own team. And sometimes I think it's appropriate to say, to be fair, there's two teams in a game of football, and the other side outperformed themselves, or they had a good plan, and they stopped us. And you got to give credit to them as well. So I'm biased, but only, I hope, in an honest way. Although you wouldn't think that sometimes when I talk about referees.
And you bring up a really interesting point, because the big debate when it comes, especially to American football, is that, the Joe Bucks of the world, the Mike Tiricos, just naming a few. Joe Buck in particular gets a lot of hate because they feel like he always hates their team. And I think it comes a little bit, and you mentioned as well, coming off of baseball in particular, where people are just used to listening to their home team call for so long. So then when they do get to watch a game on ESPN Plus for the FA Cup, or they listen to the National League commentary on that streaming service, they're used to you being, super cheerful for Wrexham with, maybe a couple, tip of the caps to the other team. So when they see it from the other side, that's when you get the, how do we sync up commentaries? I can't deal with this. Or why does it seem like they hate Wrexham? It's not that they hate Wrexham. It's just we're used to you.
I think as well, I don't want to be too critical of people who earn money doing this, because I don't. Sometimes as well, that desire to be unbiased can turn into a slight air of boredom. Especially at Wrexham's level, you've got commentators, if they take it on as a national platform, they don't know us, and they've done some research, and they'll rattle off statistics. But they're trying to be even-handed, but they also don't get too excited either way. Whereas I've got to be honest, if I was commentating on a neutral game, I'd get excited because because it's a hell of a privilege to be able to call a game. Frankly, it's a hell of a privilege to tell other people what's going on and for them to trust you that you're being accurate. So, yeah, I think sometimes neutral commentators can lapse into boredom, and it's also a very British thing. I assume it's a very British thing. We really, really love moaning. And you do get the sort of, oh gosh, I've got to be careful how I put this, the whiny British football commentator who is demanding to be entertained by this neutral game and starts complaining when they're not. And especially, you know, a very common thing on the national broadcasters is, oh, it's 0-0 at half-time, but there could be goals in the second half, whereas my perspective is a 0-0 can be a fabulous game. And I know that's something that some American sports fans would criticise football for, you know. But then, you know, to me, the low-scoring tension is what makes it exciting. Although after the Sheffield United game, I have to admit, high-scoring games can be quite good too.
Yeah, and we do soccer here too on the New Radio Sports Network. We actually cover our state champion soccer team, Sturgeon Bay, which is plays down the street from us. And yeah, you bring up a good point. What's 0-0 might be boring to some people. I mean, we've had some really exciting games that have gone down to the wire, and you know, we even have to go into the shootout just to settle it to go into the next round of the playoffs.
I mean, if you take this Sheffield United game as an example, we've had this scintillating 3-3 draw. The game at Sheffield, well, I mean, we don't know how it will go, but imagine if it was 0-0. That's a continuation of the saga. As Ryan Reynolds rightly said, sport is soap opera. You know, we've had the continuation of the saga, even if it's 0-0. That tension of one little error as time goes on could be decisive. And then if it's 0-0, it'll go to an extra half hour. We'll have real tension, and then even then maybe to penalties. And it's the possibility of something happening, if you will. I'll tell you something peculiar about an American sport, and I people will rightly shoot me down over this, but I never really fully got into NBA because it seemed to me that it's when you don't score that it matters, and that scoring felt almost, it's expected, almost felt routine. And I admit, you know, I've not tried to get into it for a long time, and I probably now would look at it a bit differently. And
no, that's pretty accurate.
When Channel 4 started in Britain, of course, we're way behind you guys in terms of being multi-channel. So when I was a teenager, the fourth channel started. That would be in the, late 80s? And they were trying to be different, and they showed British basketball. But on Monday night, they would show the final quarter of the British basketball. And I actually, oddly enough, enjoyed that more because they were terrible. You could see when you watch the NBA, they're amazing. The British guys, it was a bit more like football. They'd go up the pitch, they'd have a little shot. Maybe it missed the backboard, but actually scoring a basket felt big. And because of that, that sort of suited, I think, maybe in a way, the British sporting mentality of you wait for the tense moments when something happens. I've always thought that people who argue that American sports fans just want lots and lots and lots of points are being incredibly patronising. I mean, baseball is all about the build-up to that big moment, isn't it? As it's not... You know, I mean, people compare it to cricket. Okay, cricket can be very slow. Actually, cricket's become quite exciting lately because people are taking massive tactical gambles. But baseball isn't as slow as cricket. It still builds up to those dramatic scoring moments, and generally there aren't that many, and they're spread over 3 hours. So I think people sometimes in Britain characterise Americans as being impatient watching sport, which is an absolute nonsense.
And I think you bring up baseball, and we at the very top of this interview, you mentioned the 3 hours with baseball and things like that. You know, soccer gets kind of lumped into that here sometimes, like, oh, I'm waiting forever for a goal and stuff like that. And it comes across your commentary as well. I mean, you're talking just as quick as I did for basketball last night, as we did Gibraltar and Oconto. As fast as I did wrestling the week before. I mean, there's a lot of action. There's just not necessarily fruit to that labor all the time.
Yes, and I think sometimes soccer commentators are a little obsessed with describing the minutiae of this player's got this ball, which I admit is natural, but you need to get that full field view, because that's the other thing you've got over the listener. I don't just see what's on the ball. I see what's going on the far side, hopefully. I see the shape of the teams. And I feel like that responsibility to attempt at least to bring across a sense of the feel of the game, as well as just the functional, this guy's passed it to that guy. Well, if I'm honest, is probably part of why I talk quickly and why I get excited, because to me everything's interesting. Sometimes people ask me, you're going to be shocked at this, how I keep calm during matches. And the truth is, I think because I'm focused on the job, I don't get actually as emotional as other people do. So I feel like often when Wrexham do well, I'm not quite as excited and happy as the fans are. I would be if I was in the crowd. The upside of it is that generally when we do badly, because I'm trying to analyse it and explain what's going on, I don't think I feel it as badly either. So, but yeah, people who really know me feel that I'm actually surprisingly calm when I'm commentating. Except when I'm showboating.
And see, for us stateside, you're wild, you're crazy, but I love it. Now, how did you get into doing commentary for Wrexham?
Well, as is a podcast, I'm hoping I'm allowed some very mild swearing in this. I don't know, because it's part of the tale. I was a teenager and I saw an advert on the back of the local paper, the Wrexham Leader, saying that the hospital radio broadcast wanted volunteers to commentate on the match. And hospital radio is a big deal, or used to be a big deal in Britain, for the patients. And Wrexham were early adopters of this, so that Wrexham Supporters Association started the radio commentaries for hospital patients in the 1950s. So I was like, wow, okay, I'd love to do that. I'm more shy than I appear, but I managed to summon up the courage to phone the number, and they said, come and watch a game and see how we do it. So I went along, and this was in that big curved roof stand that you see at Wrexham, which is the side the camera's on, so you only see it in reverse shots. That wasn't there. There was a wooden structure there with a commentary box on the roof. And so I went in there, and I watched the hospital radio team commentate. And there was one chap who was ancient, and he was the doyen of Wrexham commentators. He's really well known in the local area. And I thought, I've got to watch him, because this guy's been doing it since the 50s. He knows what's going on. Now, this is where the mild swearing comes in, so I apologise. If everyone needs to bleep me, I don't know. He sat there, he had a very thick West Wales accent. And he didn't know the names of any of the other side, and he didn't want to either. So he would refer to them as by their number, but also with an unflattering adjective. So he'd be sitting there going, all through the match, their bloody number 9's got the ball. He's giving it to the bloody number 7. And I sat there at the back thinking, I'm inspired by this man, because I could definitely do that. And that was essentially all he did. It was astounding. So yeah, that got me into it. I did that for a few years, and then, well, the local radio station, Marcher Sound, it was called, they would have a reporter at the home games, but at the away games, they would just get somebody from the away club, or a reporter from that area to do it. So if Wrexham were at home to Sheffield United, there was a guy who actually did the hospital radio as well, who did it for them. But in the away games, they'd get a guy from Sheffield to do it. And so I basically, this is probably the only other time in my life when I've shown a bit of guts and push, I phoned them up. And I said, I've noticed that you don't have anyone doing away games. Wouldn't you want me to do it? And they just said yes. They didn't know who I was. It's crazy, isn't it? They didn't know who I was. They just said, yeah. And so I started doing the away games. They didn't pay for my transport, so I was out of pocket. I got a flat fee of £25 per match. And that was wonderful for me. I enjoyed it massively, travelling around the country. There weren't live commentaries generally. I would sit in the press box, and there'd be a telephone, and if something happened, I would ring the studio, or every 15, 20 minutes when it fitted in for them, they'd call me, and I'd give a summary of the game so far. And it was a real experience. It was fantastic. In fact, the only time I've commentated from Sheffield United, and I'm wondering if this will repeat next week, I went into the press box, My phone rang, I picked it up, and a guy tried to order pizza from me. And this happened throughout the match. Obviously, the number in the press box must have been close to some pizzeria somewhere. And throughout the match, the phone would ring, and I'd pick it up thinking it was the studio. And somebody in a Sheffield accent would be saying, "Can I have margarita with extra cheese?" And what? It was bizarre for me because it was early in the season, and we played a pre-season game in a town in north-west Wales called Porthmadog, very, very beautiful town on the sea. Their football team, you know, quite a small team, and we played there. They were very excited when I arrived, just simply because somebody was commentating on one of their games. And they showed me the brand new phone line, which they'd installed in the stands for reporters just a week before. But it was in the ceiling of the stand. It wasn't a big stand, but how was I supposed to connect to it? And I explained, I really can't use this. And so in the end, what they did, they said, there is one other phone that you can see the pitch from. They took me to a tiny little cabin on the sides of the pitch. And it was basically the announcer, the PA announcer's cabin. And he had a phone in there, so I was doing it from there. But in the second half, people started phoning me up and speaking to me in Welsh, and my Welsh is poor, sadly. Much of the horror of my wife's first language is Welsh. And I pick it up and I said, well, hold on, I don't understand. Could you say it in English? And it was relatives of the Porthmadog players phoning up, because the phone happened to also be the club office's phone. They were phoning up to check when the game would end so they could come and pick their husband or brother up after the match. 20 minutes, you know, hang up quickly in case the studio phones. Yeah, I'm glad I don't have to do it by phone anymore, because it was a bit peculiar.
So you went from pizza delivery man to club secretary, all in the matter of a couple of matches.
Yeah, exactly it. Exactly right. Yes, it was a strange experience. You get the odd thing happening occasionally.
Now, do you have a call that really sticks out to you, where you kind of, when you reflect on it, you know, whether it was a game-winning goal or, you know, a match that went either for or against Wrexham that really decided something major, is there a call that sticks out to you that says, man, that is like my signature call? I always think about, I always love, we had a state championship wrestling team that I got the call a few years ago. I listen to that every now and then because I'm a little bit vain. We had some bigger wins where, man, I nailed that moment. Do you have any moments like that?
Gosh, I mean, I could certainly say the biggest game I did, because in 1992, Wrexham beat Arsenal, and I was commentating on that, although I actually wasn't commentating on the exciting bits. So I can say, you know, in Britain, generally, people think that's the biggest FA Cup upset ever. Wrexham the previous year had come bottom of League Two, and it was only through bureaucracy that we weren't relegated. Arsenal were the Premier League champions. So there couldn't be any more difference between the top four divisions, and yet we were losing with 7 minutes left and beat them. But I wasn't commentating when any of the goals went in. In terms of moments, I would probably say in 1997, we won at West Ham. And it was an incredibly dramatic game. Again, it was like what I was talking about before. It was 0-0. And then a guy who had played for us earlier in his career and was a real hotshot, super fast striker, and had come back having had injuries and was a quite slow but intelligent midfielder. The injuries had changed him completely. He couldn't get into the team. He was a substitute. We brought him on near the end, and in the final minutes, it was 0-0. We were away at a Premier League team, and he scored the most sensational goal from a long way out, and Wrexham won 1-0. And I just remember absolutely going crazy. In front of me was a BBC reporter who plays for Tottenham Hotspur and was a very, very good player, called Garth Crooks. He was one of the first black players to really make a breakthrough in British football in the late 70s. And he he jumped out of his skin because I went so wild when Wrexham scored this goal, which clearly was going to be the winner. I always remember that. I got so excited, I terrified a footballer. The PS, the codicil at the end of that one, is that my dad came to the game as well, and he just was watching from the stands. And because I had to arrive early, he just went to wander around in the East End of London, never a wise idea, to kill time before the match. After the game, he was late. Usually, by the time I finished, doing the press conference, things like that, my dad would be there waiting. He wasn't there. That was very peculiar. I started thinking of, ganglands activities in the East End of London. And then he turns up. My dad is always very calm and modest. Oh, sorry I'm late. I'm like, what's the matter, Dad? Oh, I've been to the bookies. I was thinking, my dad never, ever put a bet on anything. So what you mean? And he said he was walking around, bored. He saw the bookies, and in the window it said this Wrexham player to score the first goal and Wrexham to win 1-0 was like 50-1. So he went in and, being my dad, put £1 on it rather than a good amount of money. The guy didn't even start the game, but he did come on and score the goal. So my dad comes back, oh, look, I've won £50. Oh, he was delighted. So, yeah, that was a good day all round, to be honest with you.
Now, on the flip side of that, and I have a couple entries, which I'll let you go, and I'll tell you two of my favorite moments, with one of them being, you know what, this is why I'm going to listen to all your matches. And I don't know if it's one of those things, because, like, for us, we have, the radio break, we have the commercial breaks and things like that. One of my partners here, Paul, he loves to tell the story about how I went on a rant about the movie The Natural. And we were doing baseball. There was a home run, went towards the light. And I kind of explained that part of the movie. And I asked him, I said, have you ever read the book, The Natural? I'm like, no, I've only seen the movie. And I told him, I said, don't read the book. And he's like, why? So, spoiler alert for those who haven't seen either. In the movie The Natural, the movie pretty much ends with Roy Hobbs, played by Robert Redford, hitting a home run. It hits the light standard, exploding lights. He's running around. It's the game-winning home run. I think he gets the girl in the end. That's how the movie The Natural ends. The book ends with him striking out, and it ends the same way it began, pretty much, with him getting shot by somebody. So I went on a 4-minute rant in the middle of a baseball broadcast, and then, it's the end of the inning. I sign off, okay, 3 runs on 2 hits, 1 homer by Jizwicki. You're listening to Dork County Baseball League action on 105.1 The GOAT. We go to commercial, and he looks at me and he goes, did you just completely lambast like one of the greatest baseball movies of all time? And I'm like, yeah, I guess I did. So I throw it to you. Did you have a moment where you went on like maybe a tangent or something like that, and somebody came up to you after the match and said, were you really talking about this? What's that moment for you?
Oh, too many. Can I firstly say, as I'm an English teacher, I applaud your stickler, you being a stickler for the facts. I could give you chapter on verse of how Tom Hanks, Mark Griffiths, and Bruce Willis spoiled Bonfire of the Vanities. And don't get me started on Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, a film title that even for a grammar fan like me has far too many apostrophes in it. Gosh, I go on too many tangents in commentary and in my life, and then forget what they are, and people refer back to them, and I'm racking my brain. The one that sticks in my head in life was in school. A boy walked up to me and asked me, in all seriousness, did you ever sellotape those 2 pigeons together? I was like, oh, I don't know what on earth that was referring back to, but no. And I got to be honest with you, in terms of going off on tangents, and I hate to say this, but possibly the most extreme one actually could have been last week when Wrexham beat Gateshead, and I found myself chatting about how, in my opinion, most plane crashes are caused by excess chickens getting on board.
That's what I was going to bring up.
That was a bit much, I think. But it's not the only. I've sort of
And
done
everybody
this
was
thing.
talking about roosters and everything like that.
It was genuinely what I said on air, which was that there are a couple of lovely girls who've just arrived in Britain who've come into my class from Zimbabwe, and we had a strange conversation which ended with one of them talking about these air crash investigation TV shows because she'd never been on a plane until she flew to Britain, and her cousin made her sit down and watch one before she got on the flight. Seemed a bit awful. And then I just started talking rubbish, and we ended up with this concept of the weight of a plane is so carefully measured that if a chicken gets on board and hides in the overhead locker, the plane's coming down. And that's the usual reason why a plane will go down. And it's why I always spread seed in a plane when I get on board in order to flush them out. It's a service I do for free. And, I see myself as akin to those Homeland Security guys, plain clothes fellas with the guns. My bag of seed has saved so many people on EasyJet, you wouldn't believe it.
Well, when I fly back from London in April this year, I hope to see you just throwing chicken feet all over the place. But the other one where I remember I texted a few of my friends and said, I'm listening to the Wrexham broadcast and now I'm hooked. You were calling a match and your crown broke. Do you remember this?
Oh, yeah.
You were on the air and your crown broke, and all of a sudden you said, I feel like that Simpsons episode when Homer organizes the union. Homer dental plan. And I was just laughing hysterically because I'm like, here's this guy. He's calling a match, and just like I do with our high school broadcast, as I mentioned, we do baseball, we do soccer, we do football, we do wrestling. Every now and then, especially if it gets slow, and it's why some of the people just kind of, I get weird looks for the most part. I'll throw in a movie quote or some kind of television quirk or something like that. And, I appreciate that so much. And that was, literally the moment where I said, you know what? Anytime these guys come on, whether it be on Wrexham Player or Mixler, I'm there.
Well, fantastic. I'm delighted. We clearly see things in a similar way. I mean, the way I look at it, my first priority is I must describe the game accurately. So I must admit, with the Gateshead game, when I started getting carried away, there did come a point late on where although the game was essentially dead, because we were 3-0 up and completely in control, I did start feeling I've gone too far in that direction, and I did try to pull things back to being a bit more like a football commentary. Because that is the first priority, obviously, as you know as well as I do. But by the same token, I really can't understand why people get very po-faced about sports commentating and aren't reflecting what's going on around them. Because as far as I'm concerned, there's two big duties you've got. Apart from describing the game, it's describing the occasion, the day, the place. And it's also letting them know who you are. Because especially with a club like Wrexham, we are the radio commentary team, and it's a little bit of a podcast mentality in some ways that I want everyone to get to know us. And, I mean, people say lovely things to me on Twitter, and I don't deserve it. But what really makes me happy is people picking out the other commentators to say that was great, because, they don't get to speak as much as me. I've got a big mouth. But I love that's what I want to see, that it's the whole team together and all our personalities that link up well, and people get to know all of us. I can't understand why you wouldn't want that. I can't understand, to be frank, if your tooth fell out during commentating, why wouldn't you make a big fuss of it? Because it's a major event for me. I don't spit teeth out all the time.
And we should probably get to some Wrexham. I'm sure there's some people that are listening. They want to talk to us about, or talk to you about the new center back. We won't get into that because you'll talk loops around me. I'll just be like, okay. But I guess when you reflect on Wrexham and its history and things like that, and I think I've even alluded to it to you on Twitter, there's a very community-based feel with Wrexham. Obviously, being from Wisconsin or I'm originally from Illinois, but I live here in Wisconsin. We have the Packers down the road. We're very similar in fashion. The team needed to be saved, and the community saved it. Now, obviously, now they do stock sales when they don't really need to. The money goes towards Lambeau Field more than the actual day-to-day operations. But do you feel like it's that community connection with the club that makes Wrexham Wrexham?
I do, although I'm going to make a confession that I do sometimes wonder, or no, I did sometimes wonder whether we were just... Is it a British phrase when you put ticket? I think it's Australian. When you've got tickets on yourself, when you maybe give yourself credit for something you're not actually doing. Because I honestly sometimes used to wonder, oh, Wrexham fans, we're special, we're different. I think apart from the Welsh elements, which is different, there's only 4 professional teams in Wales in the English system. I always used to think, are we actually different? Does every club see it this way? Because all clubs are to some extent rooted in their community in Britain. And I know that's something that interested Rob McElhenney a lot, the idea that we're the opposite of a franchise. There's been one franchise-style move ever in English football history, and as a result, the club that were created, MK Dons in Milton Keynes, which is a new city, well, new, 50, 60 years old, they basically took Wimbledon, who were 60 miles away, and planted the club somewhere else. And they are despised in British football by all fans now because of that. So sometimes I used to wonder, are we so special? I think we are, actually. I think what has been happening lately has shown that we are. Part of it, I think, is that you talk about clubs possibly going out of business. Well, we nearly went out of business in the 1980s, just through difficult financial times. Our great period was the 70s, but we spent a lot of money on infrastructure at the grounds when we were doing well, which was correct. And then we went into recession, and the northern areas particularly badly hit. Wrexham dropped down the divisions, and we got to the point in around 1985 where we were very close to just going bankrupt. There was no nasty owners or anything. We just looked like we were going to stop. And I mentioned the support association before, that they got a caravan and put it in the middle of the car park, and they're SOS Save Our Soccer, and they basically used to collect it every game, get people to come to the caravan and give money, and they saved the club. And then we've had, of course, the situation where we had owners who, don't want to get us in trouble, but shall we say, their intentions didn't seem totally pure. They nearly took us out of business in the 2000s, and then we managed to escape that through fan rebellion. That was what saved the club then, which obviously builds up a big community spirit. But then the club came into the hands of another person who I don't think intended initially to do anything but be good for the club. But his circumstances changed, and he ended up nearly putting the club out of business. And the fans again saved the club and then ran the club. And so I think that sense, because we were the first wholly fan-owned club in Britain. And I think that's a big part of it as well. I think there's always been a close tie with the community. Sometimes I wonder if that's true of most football clubs anyway. But I think the last 20 years, and the fact that the fans battled to save the club, and did save it on all 3 occasions in different ways, is remarkable. I mean, Neil, who does the commentaries with us, during the second of those crises, he just off his own bat pursued every football club, 92 football clubs in the Football League, in the Premier League, and got them all to donate a shirt, and then raffled them off and raised £15,000 for charity. I mean, that sort of thing, it's just out the club. That sort of thing's remarkable, and the fact that the fans pulled together so much and then ran the club and ran it responsibly is a big part of our DNA, I would argue now. And let's be honest, is also why when people ask me why Wrexham, it's a very simple answer. The club was being run right. It was being run by fans with the correct intentions. There was a fabulous community arm to the work that we do. I mean, Kerry Evans, our disability liaison officer, I thought it was wonderful that she was mentioned in Rob and Ryan's statement when they took over. because it was right to do that, because that was what the club was about. The club, under the fans, discovered that young lads who played in our first ever Football League game in 1921 died in the turf in 1924, and his grave was completely unmarked in the Wrexham cemetery. And so they raised funds to buy and put up a gravestone and tend to the grave, because he was part of our community too. Things like that draw people like Rob and Ryan who want to contribute to a community in. Plus the fact that because they ran the club responsibly, we were breaking even. So they put $2 million in initially. The other club that they were close to putting money into were about $750,000 into debt. So if they bought them and put $2 million in, they'd have put in $1.25 million. Whereas with us, they get the full bang for their bucks, didn't they?
Yep. We'll end it with a couple of quick questions here. If you had another sport that you could do radio commentary for, what would you pick and why?
I think it would be cricket. So that's not a very helpful answer, really, for a North American audience. Cricket, I do genuinely think about the commentating, even though it comes across the opposite. And some people compare what I sort of try to do with the very famous broadcast Test Match Special, which is the big cricket broadcast on the BBC. And cricket is like baseball. Well, I suppose like baseball or American football. There's a lot of space between plays, more than in baseball. And play can last, in a test match, which is the ultimate level, an entire day. So there's a lot of space for people to build up their personalities and talk, and for you to get to know the commentators. There's a lot of scope for them to continue chatting about things. And coincidentally, and this is a coincidence, honest, a tradition was developed of listeners would send them cakes to eat. I mean, cricket, how genteel is this? How cliched English is this? Cricket is a sport which has a break for lunch and a break for tea. So the day is split into three parts: lunch and tea, separated, and that is what it's called in the sport. It's not, the seventh inning stretch. It's tea. So
no Cracker Jack and peanuts there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's no one walking up and down the stands throwing franks around. Although I must say, Lord's, which is the ultimate posh sports venue, it's an amazing place to watch sports. It's a cricket ground, the oldest, 300 years old, and it is a weird experience because you hear champagne corks popping while you're watching the game, and you see them landing on the pitch. It's really odd, really odd. But so cricket is really, the commentary in cricket is fascinating. A lot of people choose to listen rather than watch cricket because it's an experience and a broadcast. So I think I'd say cricket. I used to love boxing, and I did box a little bit in university. However, in Britain now, boxing's pay-per-view, and I don't love it that much. And I've kind of fallen out of contact with it. I love cycling, despite the fact that I haven't, as is clear from my physique, cycled for a long time. But I don't think I would be good enough to commentate on cycling, because it is such a technical sport. There are some amazing cycling commentators on British TV, because cycling's become more popular, who are ex-pros who really can dig into the tactics and give a fascinating insight. So cricket, I think, is going to have to be.
And then final question for you. Obviously, we're doing this, and I thank you so much for doing this with me as we raise funds for JDRF. We'll have the link available for people to click on and do that as we hope to cure juvenile diabetes and especially help the efforts there in UK as a part of the London Marathon. What is the one place that Mark Griffiths would go to when he goes and visits London? Just so I know and I put on my to-do list when we go.
Oh, gosh. Any branch of Nando's, they do good chicken. No, I'm not going to say that. That's a tricky one, that is. I'm...
Who serves the best cup of Beauville in London?
Oh, now Bovril's a completely different matter here. You- all Bovril is amazing when it's freezing cold and you're in a football ground, and all Bovril is filth if either of those circumstances aren't achieved. So you know you could be in a football ground when it's not freezing cold. Bovril is the devil's sick. But so I'm afraid the best place for a Bovril in London is any football ground when it's deep midwinter. I'm tempted to chicken out and say that actually. Lords, the cricket ground I mentioned, they do tours, like hour-long tours, and it is fascinating, I think, whether you're a cricket fan or not, because it's so unlike other sports venues. It's got beautiful modern stands, but the pavilion where the players change is an old Victorian, massive, grand building, steeped with all sorts of peculiar little portraits of famous cricketers and different. And even if you're not a cricket fan, it is really interesting because that sense of heritage is really interesting, and they really look after it. In terms of touristy in general, I think I've got to go off the beaten track. If you go 2 stops north on the Northern Line from Euston Station, which is the line that the train from Wrexham goes to, you end up in Camden. Camden is a suburb of London that is unlike any other. It's just walk down Camden High Street and you'll see what I mean. It's a real counterculture place. There are all sorts of weird shops and weird-looking shops with. There's one which sells like boots, and it's got an enormous sort of 40-foot boot sticking out of the front of the shop. And then at the end of that road is Camden Market, and Camden Market is worth an hour or so browsing around. It sells everything and more, and the street food stalls are astounding. And when I've gone there, I'll spend a fair bit of time just deciding what food I'll buy for my lunch. You know, just by seeing, they'll have, literally, they'll have a Peruvian food stall here, and then they'll have a Mongolian barbecue stall there, and it is wonderful. And the atmosphere is great. It's quite crowded. There's lovely atmosphere in there. Yeah, I'd say Camden, get the tube to Camden, walk up Camden High Street and think, this is weird, and then go to the market. And it's also on... It's on the canals, so it's quite attractive as well. There's nice places you can sit there, have a coffee, eat your amazing food that you've just bought, and it's attractive as well. So Camden, Camden, Camden Market.
We'll make sure we put that down. We've been joined for the last almost an hour with Disney's Mark Griffiths, the voice of Wrexham FC. You can catch him on Wrexham Player, and also you can catch his podcast, the Final Whistle podcast, Ask Wrexham. I listen to them all, and if I know you had a good call, I always listen back to the goal calls once again just to enjoy that. So thank you so much for joining us, Mark. I appreciate the time.
I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it. It was an absolute honour, and I must say, please, I hope everyone does back you in your fundraising. It's a wonderful cause, and yeah, to anybody who's going to help young people to conquer juvenile diabetes is all right in my book.
All right, you've been listening to the New Radio Sports Network.